Hello, my friend-end friend. Today we're looking at 5 CSS fouls that I see even seasoned developers make, including myself, and we're starting off with the first one, which is useless declarations. And I've seen this more and more with the rise of AI because it likes useless declarations. And the one I always like to use here is a width of 100%. People like declaring 100% or even 100 VW for the times when they want it on the body, which, as you might see, can cause horizontal overflow, especially if you have fixed scroll bars like Windows users have on Chrome. Though that is potentially getting fixed, but we're not quite there yet. But I'll put a link to a Abramus article that talks about how you can actually get 100 VW to take into account the scroll bar, which is kind of cool. But 100% is something I see people declare when they don't need it, because as you can see in the two divs that are up there, they look exactly the same and they work exactly the same. They're going to grow, they're going to shrink, they're going to match the parent, even if we just have a width of auto, and you don't need a width of auto because that's just what it does by default. And it seems like it's the type of thing that won't actually cause a problem. But in some places, like if it's a flex item, it could potentially get in the way. With grid, it could potentially cause overflows. Or if you add margins on these, it can as well. So let's just add a margin to the left side of both of these. And I don't know, make 100 pixels or something. And if we take a look at what that's done, the one that's auto width has not caused any problems because it just takes that margin into account. Whereas now we have 100% plus the margin on the side, and all of a sudden we have an overflow, and that sucks. You might be going, well, Kevin, that's because you didn't declare a box sizing border box. It has nothing to do with that. Box sizing border box. If I do that, it doesn't change anything because box sizing border box, it goes up to the border. Margins are on the outside of the border. The size of my box isn't going to be influenced by margins in any way. They're always tacked on afterwards. So just don't declare a width on something if you don't need to. And in the similar spirit of that, we're going to look at this one, which I guess is a useless declaration, but it's also about working with how the browser wants to work in the first place. And it's when we get overly prescriptive, because sometimes you might want a height on something. You need to have it, so you declare a height of 250. I know this is like a simple example, so you might know like, oh, we don't want to do that because it overflows. Whereas the auto one just works because auto on width wants to be as wide as possible. Auto on height wants to be as short as possible, but it automatically adapts to the content that's in there. If the content needs more room, it will grow to adjust, which is fantastic. So as much as possible, we want to lean into these default behaviors. It makes our lives a lot easier, and it just makes things a lot more adaptable in general. But sometimes you do need to have something in place. So if you do need something in place, that's where you want to work with how the browser's already trying to work. In this case, it's trying to be as short as possible. So I want to set a constraint on that. I want to prevent it from getting too small. So instead of a regular height, I could come in and say this is a minimum height. And now it's going to be at least 250. Let's do 350 so we actually see a change here. And so we get a height of 350 as the minimum size, but it's still going to adapt if it needs to adapt and grow and shrink and grow and shrink, and everything works. So we're still working with the way the browser wants to work with it, but we're setting the constraint. I'm repeating myself a little bit, but I really want to hammer that home. And if you really want this hammered home more, and these are the types of things that do trip you up, or just CSS in general is something that you were frustrated with, I want to let you know that I'm doing a completely new version of CSS Demystified, which is my flagship CSS course. I'm redoing the entire thing. I've put a wait list now on the page. The link for it is down below. And the first module is called the CSS Mindset. So we have a whole bunch of lessons that are just dedicated to working with the browser and understanding why we need to do it and everything that has to do with that. And from there, we're going to get into layouts, grid, and flexbox, and all sorts of fun stuff. If that sounds interesting to you, check out the link in the description. And just to sort of go back into this part for 1 second, or maybe back to this example where we were dealing with the widths, the same type of thing can come in. Like here I have a container where I've set a width of 60%, but a lot of the time you won't do 60%. You might say, I don't know, 600 pixels. You don't want to do that, right? Because 600 pixels means it's going to overflow. It's also take off this margin left here. So now it's just locked in at 600. It wants to be as wide as possible. We don't want it to get that big. So we want to once again set a constraint, but this time we want to set the constraint as a maximum. So we can use a max. Got to spell it correctly, but we want to throw a max width on there instead. And now it actually isn't causing any overflow. I'm actually just going to go on the body. So you can see this. We'll do a margin, or we'll just say a margin of 10 pixels or something, just because my outline on the sides was shooting off the side. Now we can see that it's actually shrinking down, whereas if I just did a width on there, it's actually overflowing and we're getting some side scrolling. So yeah, working with the browser is just the most important thing we can do. Try and remember what the browser's trying to do, and then just work with those behaviors, and you're going to save yourselves a lot of headaches. And now for point 3, it's something that I'm 100% guilty of, which is staying organized and taking the time to refactor sometimes. And this is an example of, this is the live version of my website right now. I created a link button component, and I have a fancy button component. The fancy button is a fancy looking button. If we jump on over to my website, we can see them down here where it's these buttons that sort of it follows the direction of the mouse cursor coming in and out. And I wanted buttons like this and links like this. And the easiest thing to do at the time was to make a link version of it and a button version of it. And this works completely fine. There's no issue with having the two components. There's fancy ways we could have it adapt to which one we want, but completely fine. The problem is all my styles are here. And then I'm repeating most of those styles here. There's some small differences between the two probably, just because one's a link and one's a button. They're probably actually exactly the same. But at the time, all I did was duplicate the feature I was working on and then went from there. Or if we jump on over to my style sheet, I actually don't know what we're going to find here. I've just been like hacking away at this. I actually know there's one problem that's in here that I made because I just saw this before recording. If I look in here and I find my layers, which we go down a little bit more, we'll find a layer. Right here, I made a layer reset, and it actually doesn't close, or it probably does eventually, but I don't know where it closes. I accidentally just included a lot of stuff in there. So it's closing here, which is fine. These are things I wanted in there. But at one point I was just like hacking away at my heading, my hero area. And for whatever reason, I was like, oh, it goes with my H1. So I dropped it in there. But like all of this really shouldn't be part of my reset, right? Even this anchor name, I don't think, the viewport one, I think we can leave there. I don't even think I need that. I stopped using that. Oh, we have more here actually that we need. So this one, maybe I could keep up in the reset. Probably not, but you get the idea that I probably should have taken the time to start coming in with other things. And it's one of those things that's very normal. You start hacking away at stuff, you just start getting it to work, which is completely fine. But then once you have it working, and sorry, I'm scrolling a lot now, I'm trying to find where I want to put this in my code base. Overflow scroller, these are kind of more generic still. Avatar, underline, these are all very generic things. This is more layout related. Maybe still not the best place, but I'm going to drop it here for now. So I'll find a better place for it after. But it's very normal just to throw things in there, get things working. That's actually one of the pieces of advice, not part of the tips I have for today, but often when you're stuck on something, you're not sure where to start, the best thing to do is the quick wins. Just start writing code, get the ball rolling so your sort of things are moving in the right direction. But then that often results in lots of extra stuff, and it's no fun refactoring and doing it, but you thank yourself later. Like right now, the reason I even thought of this one was I was making changes to my fancy button and I wasn't seeing those changes reflected. And I'm like, why is this not working? I even like set the background to red and I'm like, it's not changing to red. I couldn't figure it out. I'm like, oh, it's a link button. And it should just have a single class in my regular CSS file and not worry about it. But I took a shortcut. Again, the shortcut is fine, but we don't want to take the time afterward and you'll thank yourself. Or if you're working in a team or something like that, especially true, but even in personal projects like this one, it's always worth the effort to actually put it in. So once this video is done, I'll practice what I'm preaching and hopefully end up actually doing that. And while we have my website up here, actually another one that I wanted to look at, and this would be a nice example, is if I look at my headings here, I never really, or not my headings, but my navigation, you can see there's an outline coming up on those. I have a few other effects in place. But I like having the outline on there, even if I don't need it. But there's a lot of people, you can see on this one, for example, the KP, it gets the outline on it because it's a link and you can focus on it. And you want to make it obvious that something can be focused. But people, and I get it, it's usually, I think, from a stakeholder who tells you, that your boss or somebody who happened to click on a button and you get an outline on it. So you end up with a star of outline none. But the problem with this is that it makes it so when you focus on things, you don't know it. And I generally don't like calling out companies and stuff, but ESPN has a really bad website when it comes to this, because if you tab through their website, if you might notice, I don't know if it's on screen or not, but I'm tabbing through and I see the links, they're showing up in the bottom corner for me that shows me the address, and you can see now the page is actually jumping. I have no idea what I'm focused on. And so it's just a terrible, terrible user experience for anyone who's coming in and keyboard navigating. And there's lots of people who keyboard navigate. There's power users who just prefer to do it. NeoVim users out there know what I'm talking about, but there's just tons of reasons that someone might be using their keyboard to navigate. and they're just not going to use your website if you make it hard to do, which like this is literally impossible to know what I'm focused on. So really, really bad on that front. So the solution to this is thankfully very easy to do. Just instead of worrying about focus, you just use focus visible instead. If you see here, if I click on a button clicked on, if you have focus, will actually gain focus. So it gains that focus state. And that's the thing that people, especially a button that's opening a navigation or something, that's annoying if it gains focus. But here, the focus visible, I can click on the button. It's going to do whatever that button needs to do. It's not going to get a focus ring on it. If I tab to that though, you can see that it's actually getting the pink focus on there. So focus visible is what you want to use most of the time, if not all the time, instead of using focus. I will say it's mostly buttons where you'll see this difference. If you're in form fields, whether you click or not, if you're using focus visible, it's still going to work the exact same way. It's the browser deciding based on the user's primary input method, as well as the type of element it is, and buttons for the most part are the one where you'll notice it the most often. But I believe in all focusable things now, this is the default for the user agent styles, and it's the default of what I use. So don't worry about focus, use focus visible. And that way, if you're needing to add your own focus states and things like that, just do it focus visible and you won't get those annoying things that your higher ups or bosses are telling you to get rid of, leading to really bad user experiences like we saw on ESPN. And the final one that I'm going to talk about is something I don't have an example for, I have lots of examples of it, I guess, but it's about using the right tool for the right job. And I see a lot of hesitancy for people, or not hesitancy, but it's people getting comfortable with what they know and then not learning the more efficient or effective tool for the job that they're doing. And this is people that learn Grid really well and then use it for things that Flexbox should be used for, and vice versa, where people get really comfortable with Flexbox and they start over relying on it when Grid would help you out. This is one of those things where I have seen AI just have a tendency to rely too much on Flexbox and use it for things where Grid would actually be better, just because there's more training stuff out there with Flexbox, I think. And there's patterns that have been created that people used Flexbox for. It's more complicated. The AI gets you 90% of the way there, but you need to make a tweak to it. And then the Flexbox isn't actually doing the job you want it to, and it becomes harder to tweak. Whereas if you just switched over to Grid, it would be easy peasy. If you'd like to know more about that, there is a video linked in the description about how I make decisions on whether I should be using Flexbox or Grid in any given situation. And I know like having two layout tools can feel annoying. There's a reason that we have both of them. I addressed that in that video as well. But it's also one of those things that you don't need to be masters of both of them. You only need to learn the familiar patterns with both of them. And the more you use either one of them, the better at it you're going to get. But yeah, you can keep both of them fairly simple and accomplish most of the layouts that you're going to need to accomplish with them. And if you want to learn more about Flexbox and Grid, you don't mind waiting a few more weeks until the course is out. As I said, deep dives into both of them in CSS Demystified. Link for that is in the description below. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you got a few tips. If you have any others, please leave a comment down below to let me know what they are. And with that, I want to give a very big thank you to Johnny, who's my enabler of awesome, as well as all my other patrons and channel members for their continued support. And of course, until next time, don't forget to make your corner of the internet just a little bit more awesome.